doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of time to do investor relations. But if you can keep your investors engaged, either through a newsletter or just some kind of regular communication with them about what you're doing, that is the number one thing. Hi, it's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to be sharing with other entrepreneurs. And my name is Nadia Sood. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Credit Enable. We're a credit insights and technology solutions company. And you can think of us as a bit between Credit Karma, where we help borrowers understand their credit position and improve it, and Uber on the other side, where we help lenders deploy capital efficiently into the SME segment.
Perfect. And how did you realize there was a need for this service?
So like most founders, I decided to focus on something that really annoyed me. And prior to setting up this business, I was a debt and equity investor for many years. I ran really large investment portfolios where normally the investor that I was representing could be a corporate or a private equity fund, took an owner operator position in the investments that we made. And we ended up having to finance a huge number of SMEs simply because our supply chain required that they be able to deliver on time. They were normally under working capital strain, and the formal financial institutions, the banks and non-bank finance companies that existed that should have been servicing them just couldn't service them in an efficient manner. It struck me that there was an opportunity really to lift this rather dysfunctional trading activity that happened onto a technology backbone that would allow it to trade efficiently. And that was really the inspiration, having lived and breathed, the problems that SMEs encounter, both from the perspective of being an investor myself and having to finance them, but also interestingly, as the daughter of an entrepreneur who went through the same cycle whilst I was growing up. So I had the personal experience and then the professional experience of it.
Makes a lot of sense. And obviously with this business, there's, I suppose, a few different angles to it. You need to be very technically minded for it. There's also the finance side. And then, as you say, having the personal experience as a founder as well. So there seems to be a real mix there. So how do you make sure you've got all the expertise you need around you?
Oh, well, that's such an interesting question. And of course, it comes down to the people that you're able to attract into your team. And I have two philosophical beliefs. One is that, they like to say it takes a village to raise a child. I really believe that it takes a village to raise a company. And that's what you're doing is so critical as well, to allowing founders to share with one another, help each other kind of avoid the pitfalls and scale more quickly on the basis of the advice and learnings they can acquire from their colleagues. But I think certainly being able to find highly talented people who hopefully are smarter than yourself as the CEO, that's what I like to look for. But also surrounding yourself with advisors who can help you manage through key strategic issues or bring expertise to the table that you might not be able to afford in the early days as a full-time input into the company or a full-time person, but certainly, having a great advisory board with expertise that you don't necessarily have inside of your team can really help with that. And that's one of the things I think we've really focused on at Credit Enable, is to try to build that expertise both inside and outside the company, but in the framework of that village that's supporting us to grow.
Yeah, and talk to me a bit about the early days then. So before you raised investment, what did the business look like at that point, and what did you have to get in line to get to the point where you could raise the investment and really start to scale?
Right. So our story is an interesting one. It started with a one-page PowerPoint deck that I took to the Shell Foundation and said, because I had a background in energy and energy investing, and there's a huge issue in the energy sector where access to finance impedes the delivery of renewable energy globally. And so I had seen this from this angle, which was really important to the Shell Foundation. And I said to them, look, I think we can do something about this. And here's my embryonic idea. And what do you think about backing this? And so they were actually the first backers. My co-founder and I put money into the firm ourselves first, but the first external backers were the Shell Foundation. And it was a big idea that could stand a chance of resolving a specific pain point for the distribution of renewable energy, which is a big problem in and of itself.
Mm.
I think they liked it, and so they decided to back us. And without them, we probably wouldn't be where we are, because having their backing and their expertise allowed us to do lots of experimentation early on, R&D, because they financed us through a non-dilutive grant, which allowed us some freedom to experiment a bit and get the business to a maturity level where we could then go out and get commercial investors to come into the business and back us.
Yeah, and what were the real differences between raising from the Shell Foundation to commercial investors? What were the key differences there in terms of the things you needed to talk about, the things you needed in place, and how you presented the company generally?
Sure. Well, I think at the level of the rigor that the institution wants you to have about the thinking that you've done, the potential business opportunity, the market size, I don't think there was really fundamentally any difference between Shell Foundation and the later commercial investors who came in. The difference was that they are willing to take a risk earlier on in a business that doesn't have a proven business model yet, provided that that business has an idea behind it that could impact on millions of people's lives positively. So they will take a position earlier on and help that company grow without having the same expectations about commercial returns. But in terms of what, the kind of typical questions they want you to be able to answer: how are you going to build a team? What's the product you're going to take to market? Who would be the buyer of the product? Why would they be willing to pay? Those things are consistent across them and the later commercial investors we had.
And what changed within the business? Getting this investment in, what did it make possible that you wouldn't have done otherwise?
So that first investment by Shell, and then they followed on with 3 additional investment rounds with us, gave us a lot of freedom to do market testing and R&D to build the core analytics capabilities that we have in the business, and experiment with the delivery of those analytics through technology. So that was a huge positive effect for us in the company, because we didn't have to use equity to finance that. Afterwards, the first round of commercial investment that came in really allowed to hire more people, hire talented people who had expertise, domain expertise. And of course, it allowed us to really build our technology platform, which was core to us being able to scale and be able to deliver, in a meaningful way to a meaningful number of clients and small businesses.
Mm. And of course, there's the stakeholder management that comes with that following the investment as well. So what are your top tips for keeping the investors on side and making sure that they're happy with your progress?
Well, I think one of the most critical things is just openness and honesty. And it's really hard when you're in a startup because you're balancing so many day-to-day things. You're fighting fires all the time. Your day is probably 15 hours long, if not more. So it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of time to do investor relations. But if you can keep your investors engaged, either through a newsletter or just some kind of regular communication with them about what you're doing, that is the number one thing. Number 2, and probably even more important, is actually being open with them about challenges that you're facing. I think investors, and I know this from having run large private equity funds myself before, the last thing you want is to be told on D-Day that there's no more money in the company and we have to shut everything down. Because normally, if you're invested in the business, if you had known that in advance, you would have tried to help. And that might have even meant doubling down on your investment or bringing in a new investor to support the founders. And COVID, really emphasized that, because obviously there were lots of really solid businesses that then got badly impacted by government decisions, which were obviously in the interest of the larger population's health, but might have scuppered your plans and really put you under a cash crunch. So keeping people informed, not just about the great highlights, but like, oh, we're really struggling with this today. We actually might not generate revenue for 5 months. What should we do? And keeping them in your counsel, I think, is very, very important. And the third thing I would say is, see them as your allies. There's a reason that they invested in you in the first place. It's because they thought you had promised to do something big.
Mm.
Generally, that's why someone wants to invest in an early stage business. It's a high risk business. There's more chance they're not going to get their money than there is that they will. So if they're there at the table already, that's a huge endorsement of what they think about you as a founder and what they think about your business's potential. So when you have challenges, you can also treat them as a counsel, right? They've seen lots of things before. They might have sorted through an issue like that with another one of their portfolio companies in the past, and they could maybe give you the benefit of things that haven't worked and things that have worked. So treat them as your friend rather than as an adversary, I would say, is very, very important.
Mm. And obviously you've come a long way since launching. So I'm always interested to hear how's that affected your role within the business as the founder? How's that evolved?
Yeah, it's very different, and each stage is very different, and sometimes it's difficult to manage that. Like, I used to literally on a daily basis talk to everybody that worked with me. And now during the COVID period, we've actually hired a substantial number of people, and I don't necessarily have any interaction with them except for on a global call once a week. So you become more distant for sure from the people, and so finding a way to keep engaged with them or having a touch point that's more personal becomes a challenge. But I think it's really important to be able to keep doing that. But that's definitely changes as you get bigger, right? The second thing is, of course, whereas I used to know the detail of every single thing we were doing in the company, I just cannot know that anymore. So the ability to delegate and to have trust in your people just becomes that more important as you scale. And that's also challenging for founders, right? When you used to review the sales pitch that went out and you knew exactly what was in it every single time, and then suddenly sales pitches are going out and you might not be looking at them, and they might not look exactly the way you would have imagined that they should, but allowing for the opportunity to make mistakes, right? So long as the mistakes are corrected and they're not, strategic errors that will, cripple the business, you have to just kind of accept that more mistakes will be made. You won't even know about them, and you kind of need to be fine that they've happened and move on.
Not always the easiest. So, and what are the big sort of challenges and goals then for the next year for the business?
So for us, it's really scaling. We're trying to really scale the business aggressively. We're onboarding a lot of new lender clients, and that is challenging because each has different processes, different sales cycles. So we have, a laser focus on making sure that onboarding and then delivery of service is really at a very high standard after the onboarding occurs. So we're really excited about this next year. It's all about growth for us, and smart growth and empathetic growth, because one of the things we really pride ourselves on as a firm is that we care deeply about the outcome for the SME. For every dollar that we bring, or every pound or every rupee that we bring into an SME, there's going to be a job created, right? So what we do is highly impactful. And equally, if we don't, keep our customer service aligned with our brand, which is around empathy and being a partner, we can have a negative impact. So what I'm really focused on for this year is growth, but smart and empathetic growth, so that we make sure we maintain that relationship with both our borrowing customers and our lender partners.
Perfect. And for those listening, where can they find out more about both yourself and the business?
Oh yeah, so you can learn more about us at www.creditenable.com, or find me on LinkedIn under my name, Nadia.